Today, I'm going to be showing you the best build you can make around Maliketh's Black Blade, and it's quite possibly one of the best colossal weapons, infused with the Destined Death abilities, making it one of the most powerful weapons in the entire game. Now of course, Maliketh's Black Blade is Maliketh's main weapon, believe it or not, and to obtain it, all you simply need to do is defeat Maliketh and use his remembrance to purchase the weapon from the Maiden inside of the Round Table Hold. And before you say it, yes, this weapon is of course incredibly late game, but just for reference, the gameplay that you're seeing in the background is from New Game Plus 6, and this thing still absolutely wipes the floor with most bosses. Also, throw in the fact that you guys are probably better than me and I'm trash at the game, you guys will probably just have a much better time using the weapon in general. But even trash players like myself can have a huge amount of success with this weapon, especially when you delve into these stats. And again, as always with these builds, it is a level 150 character, and as you can see, we've got 50 points into Vigor, 20 points into Mind, 24 Endurance, 57 Strength, 12 Dexterity as that is required to wield the weapon, 10 Intelligence, 46 Faith, and 10 Arcane. Now the 10 in Intelligence and Arcane are my base stats. When I started this character, I chose the Wretch build, so essentially I did not put any point into Intelligence or Arcane, and of course Strength and Faith are going to be the best scaling stats for this weapon, hence why we put as many points as we can into both of those stats. Now just to explain the Faith a little bit more and why it's at 46, I did that purposely to use the Black Blade incantation to carry on with the Destined Death theme of this build, but in all honesty, I actually did not really use it. I think I maybe used it once or twice during the whole recording of using this weapon, because there was one other thing that I forgot about that's just as good, and that is the Black Knife. Now as much as this build is obviously revolving around Maliketh's Black Blade, I highly suggest that you also run the Black Knife to give yourself a ranged version of the Destined Death Ashes of War. Because if you didn't know for whatever reason, the unique thing about Destined Death is when you use the ability on your enemies, you will not only deplete 10% of your enemy's health bar straight away, also making it unrecoverable for I believe about 30 seconds, but you will also deal damage over time. And the brilliant thing about Destined Death is it works on every single enemy in the game, so in every single boss fight, you can take away around about 20% of their health before you even start. Like I say, I was going to use the Black Blade incantation for this, but for lower FP consumption and just also a cooler look, you can use the Black Knife instead, and I highly recommend doing so. But either way, it is still good to go into around about the 40-45 mark in terms of your faith, and then pump everything else into strength, because when you do so, the main star of the show, the Maliketh's Black Blade, will hit like an absolute truck. Again, the Ash of War with Maliketh's Black Blade has 3 different stages, first of which swiping your enemy in a sideways motion before then slamming the sword into the ground, which again can hurt your enemies if you attack them with that, before then doing a flurry similar to that of like the waterfowl attack that Millennia does, but of course this time round it's infused with that Destined Death ability, which can do thousands of damage on its own, but then also affects your enemy's health, taking that 10% away, and will then continue to do damage over time afterwards. But I know what you're probably going to say next, because although Destined Death is brilliant, it is classed as holy damage, but even if you are coming up against someone like the Elden beast that's heavily resistant to holy damage, and find yourself maybe doing a little bit less damage with that flurry of attacks or the damage over time, you will still have a great colossal weapon capable of doing thousands of damage just with its base AR, which will also stagger most enemies in 2 or 3 hits, especially if you use the talismans and the wonder physic that we'll talk about in a moment. So even in a worst case scenario, if that Ash of War isn't doing so much damage, you will still have a brilliant weapon that will allow you to do a whole bunch of critical hits, again dealing thousands of damage on its own. And again, just to remind you of the excuse I said at the beginning of the video, if you're better than me, which you most likely are, that is going to be extremely useful, because you'll pretty much be critting every single boss every 10 or 15 seconds or so. And of course, in order to mimic the damage output that you're seeing on screen, here are the talismans that I was running with this build. So first and foremost, we had the Ritual Swords talisman to boost our damage output by 10% whenever we're at full HP, and that's for everything that you're using, whether that be incantations or the Maliketh's Black Blade. But again, to get the best damage output with the Black Blade's Ash of War, we can also run the Shard of Alexander, and where it's also holy damage, we can also run the Sacred Scorpion Charm to give that an extra boost by 12%. But then with this specific build, where it's a colossal weapon, I was also running the Erdtree Favor plus +2. That way I got boosts to HP, stamina, and also my equipment load to allow me to run a heavier armor set, whilst also having a larger stamina pool to get off multiple heavy attacks in quick succession, whilst also just giving me a little bit extra HP to survive in those later new game pluses. But we can also boost the damage output even more with the Wonder Physic, and I highly recommend that you run the Holy Shrouding crack tier along with the Stone Barb crack tier, especially if you're in the later new game pluses, to help you break your enemies' poises whilst also giving you an extra 20% in your damage output. And then where we've got so much faith in this build as well, we can also run the boosts Golden Vow and Howl of Shabiri to give us both a +15 and +25% damage boost to our overall damage respectively. And like I say, with all of those things combined, that is how you're going to be doing thousands of damage in very quick succession with this weapon. And the other thing I didn't actually mention earlier is that the Maliketh's Black Blade's Ash of War does do a substantial amount of poise damage, especially with the first 2 attacks when you physically hit your enemies with those swings, and it's just a perfect colossal weapon to just bonk your enemies around the head with, look like a beast whilst you're doing so, whilst also being able to annihilate them with that Ash of War. And I know I tend to get a few comments about it as well, but if you wanted to know the armor set that I'm running, in this video I was running the Great Helm along with Ronin's armor with Raging Wolf gauntlets and Fingerprint greaves. So it's kind of a mixed match of all sorts of different things, but I was trying to get the best sort of protection as well as the best poise possible with the limited equip load. So yes, if you do find yourself struggling and maybe want to use a much heavier armor set, then feel free to maybe take some points out of Faith and chuck them into Endurance, because if anything that's going to be necessary if you also want to cosplay as Maliketh and use the full set. But if you're more focused about getting the most damage output, then definitely keep the stats as I have, and that will also give you access to pretty much every incantation in the game to run other things like the Ancient Dragon incantations or even Frenzied Flame incantations, giving yet another way to deal a tremendous amount of damage with this build. But with that said, that is everything that you need to know, and that for me is the ultimate Maliketh's Black Blade build. But as I've said already, I am not the best Elden Ring player out there, and I know that you guys are just as creative as me when it comes to creating these kinds of builds, so if you've got any ways to make this build even better, feel free to chuck the recommendations in the comments down below, because I know a lot of you also get down there and share your thoughts and opinions on these builds. So yeah, definitely feel free to get your suggestions down below, and whilst you're down there, if you happen to like this video at any point or found it in any way interesting, please be sure to hit that like button. It's the quickest and easiest way to let me know that you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more crazy builds like this. And if you're new around here or find yourself coming back to the channel, feel free to subscribe. I mean, you kind of like the content if you're still here, and by subscribing you will make sure that you never miss out on a future build video like this. I'm also potentially going to start live streaming relatively soon because I've done a few upgrades to my PC, believe it or not, and I can actually do things like have 2 applications open at once, so live streaming is going to be an actual possibility now. So yeah, if you want to be involved with all of the Elden Ring content and just genuinely stay up to date, then obviously make sure that you're subscribed. But otherwise, with all of that self-promotion aside, just a huge thank you to everybody that has supported the channel so far. You're all freaking legends, and we're very quickly heading towards that 20,000 subscriber mark. But just in general, you're showing so much love for the recent videos, and yeah, I just couldn't thank you guys enough. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Obviously, go have fun with the Maliketh's Black Blade and let me know how you get on. But I guess in the meantime, I will catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.